Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today's session. As Dan mentioned, my name's Matthew Laskay, and we'll be spending the next 45 minutes or so talking about some skills and some tips that I'm going to provide from my experience over the years of how you might be able to get an advantage, one, in getting a job, and two, if you're already in a job. Wow, the market is pretty tough at the moment, isn't it? It's really hard to get a job, and just as hard at the moment, I guess, to keep a job. One positive that I have seen in the industry recently is in the last few months, 2 or 3 months in particular, is that there seems to be a lot more increase in activity. I'm seeing a lot more jobs being posted, a lot more vacancies, and a lot more need for people. Sometimes we're also seeing some downsizing because of the, I guess, furlough changing as well. But it is all in all, I think, getting a lot more positive in the last 3 months than it has been. So how can you get an advantage over somebody else? How can you make sure that you stand out? That's what we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to jump into some slides. As Dan mentioned, we're going to be doing this one slightly differently. I'm going to have this a bit more interactive than we normally would do. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this broken up into 3 sections. And the topic is 3 business skills, but I'm also going to give you some extra tips than just 3. We're going to break it up into 3 areas: industry skills, commercial skills, and personal skills. Okay, so the first one, industry. What is it that you need to do to try to, show yourself as an employable person? Obviously, you've got your education, but what else can you do to do that? What are the things they don't teach you in university necessarily that businesses are looking for that can help you in a business? So they're some of the commercial ones. And then what can you do as a person to stand out, to make yourself more noticeable in there? So Dan mentioned there, my name's Matthew Laskay. I'm the chair for the Institution of Mechanical Engineers Scottish region. So I'm involved in a lot of engineering businesses and manufacturing businesses, particularly throughout Scotland and also in the educational areas. I do training with the institution, a lot of training courses in maintenance and engineering related. I do lecturing at some of the universities local as well. So I'm involved in a lot of different areas. And so what I want to do today is share my ideas of how you can improve your chances based on my personal experiences as an engineer, as an engineering manager, and also as a director of a business. What do I look for? So the first topic I want to talk about is what I call industry skills. Now, obviously, a lot of you will be studying, either finished studying or still studying at the moment. So let's assume we've got the technical skills to do a job. But what else do we need to do that? My background, if you've noticed, is even though I'm living in Aberdeen in Scotland for the last 10 years, the accent is not Scottish. I'm actually from Melbourne, originally in Australia. And I started my first role in margarine and oils, which is why I've got a little picture of oil there, and in rolling mills, aluminium rolling mills and smelters. I then moved to Perth. That was my drive to work each day along the coast towards a lovely refinery on the coast of Perth there, working in alumina refineries and the mines. So already after a few years of working, it was about traveling to something else that gives better opportunity for what the future was going to be. Then about 10 years ago, I ended up traveling from a bit bigger trip all the way over to Scotland. And again, in Scotland, I've lived around in a few different areas, and I've been in Aberdeen for the last 10 years or so. And over that 20 years, 25 years of engineering background, I've been involved in a lot of industries and a lot of different interesting projects. This was one that we had to design in a refinery. It was a little off-road all-terrain scissor lift. It's very hard to get all-terrain scissor lifts in the area that we wanted, so we ended up building one and having to get this one certified on the front of a little bobcat. That was quite a challenging project to get through and certified. Working in refineries where there's all sorts of horrible conditions, where you got erosion, corrosion, hot temperatures, caustic acid, all sorts of different holes. That's the roof of some of the tanks we had to work on. More recently, the Dundee train station, designed some staircases for that as part of my business for the new revamp in Dundee there that they're undergoing. And being in Aberdeen, of course, you don't get away from working offshore on oil rigs, doing repairs and modifications. So there's a big variety of different areas there, going from Melbourne to Perth to Scotland, working all over the world. And I think that's kind of the message, the first message or tip that I want to share with you is be prepared for change. Some of the places I've worked in there, Australia, worked for a Norwegian drilling company, gone to Holland, worked all over the UK, been offshore, been all sorts of places there. And even though my background is a mechanical engineer, which is what I studied, it's been split pretty evenly over all of these different roles of starting as a mechanical engineer, being thrown in as a process engineer, learnt a lot about reliability, working as a reliability engineer. And then the progression as a lot of engineers will take is towards project manager and management. And the last 6 years I've been director of a business. So first message there, be prepared for change, not just for change in roles, but also change in location. I was speaking to a person in wind turbines about 2 weeks ago, actually, and he was saying that they're really finding it tough to get UK engineers into wind turbines because they're just not prepared to travel. They think that they were going to get a job locally, and as soon as you mentioned that you'd need to travel all around the country, travel offshore, or maybe move and live in another country, they just weren't willing to do it. So automatically they were ruling themselves out of those roles. I think they were offering 6 graduate apprenticeship roles in the UK. They had about 1,000 apply. And over in the Europe, where they were offering similar roles for the jobs over there, they were offering 100. So sometimes you just have to maybe change, as I've done in there. So first off, you are developing technical skills. A lot of you, as I said, not everyone's going to go down the education and university or degree or apprenticeship maybe type of routes, but the first one is develop your technical skills. Get those fundamental understanding first, because that's what's going to make you be able to apply for that job in the first place. But then you're going to be applying for the same job that all of the other people in your class have been applying for, or all of the people throughout the country with the same technical skills. So how do you then get a job after that? Gain practical experience. And I'm going to talk a bit about this towards the end of the webinar, about how can you show that technical experience as well as the practical experience when you can't get that first job. But also be prepared for change and travel. Change in roles. Just because you're studying engineering doesn't mean you will be an engineer for the rest of your life. And I'd probably say that most of you won't be, because engineers are very good at moving into different roles. And the reason they're good at moving into different roles is because they are problem solvers. Engineers can be a visionary type of people where they're creative and they come up with all weird and wonderful solutions, or they can be what I call that sort of head down, hardworking builder type of person where they sit in a computer and they do design work, they do calculations, they get things done really, really well. So think about yourself. Are you a visionary type of person, or that builder type of person? Are you that entrepreneurial sort of side of the one where you're just always coming up with good ideas and you want to develop something? Or are you an engineer where you're better suited to doing the problem solving thing? Both are problem solvers. And I think the reason why there's so many engineers in high roles these days is because they're creative problem solvers. They can adapt to different changes, different challenges, and different roles. So that's my first one. How do you make that stand out on your CV? Firstly, how do you get practical experience when you can't get the first job? You must have experience, but how do you get experience? Why don't you volunteer at a place? Can you do free volunteer work on a weekend once a week? People are still working at home. Maybe you can do remote working, volunteer work. Just get involved, get something on your CV that shows that you're doing something more. Show that what your interests are, and not just your fun interests, your engineering related interests. Are you a member of a group? Are you a member of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers? Are you a member of a local committee? Do you help organise events? Do you just attend activities? Show people that you're doing more than just that technical part of it. I think that's one of the things when I'm looking at, where have we gone? One of those things when I'm looking at who we're going to hire, when you've got a whole pile of CVs, what makes that person stand out? Yes, they've got a degree, they've got an apprenticeship, they've got whatever qualification it is to apply for that specific job. But what else is it? What experience have they got? Volunteer work? What experience have they got organizing things? Are they problem solvers? Are they go-getters? What are those sorts of people? So Dan, have we got any questions so far on the first part of it, what I call the industry skills?
Yeah, we've got one question's come through actually from Emma, and it's kind of related, but she kind of asked, how do you manage change and moving countries for work if you actually want to start to build a family?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I'll the family bit I'll answer second. The first part is that these days there's a lot of roles that are outside of our area now. You know, once upon a time you would probably work somewhere close to your house and you would go to work and you'd stay in a workplace for a long time. These days it's very rare that I see on anyone's CV that they've worked somewhere for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, like what my parents would have at the time. So people are changing and getting those opportunities, and because travel is much more accessible, roles are much more accessible. And it is hard working away from home. You know, people, if you work offshore, you might work away for 2 or 3 weeks without coming home. And that's really hard on families. It's not something that I wanted to do, working away three weeks at a time and then coming back for 3 weeks, but some people love it. But if you're away for effectively 6 months for the year, you're missing every second birthday, every second Christmas, every second event. So you need to decide if that's what you want to do. And quite often I find when I talk to apprentices that I teach there, it's get the experience early on when you can get it. If you're working in a company that offers you work offshore and you're living at home still, or you're sharing a flat with a few friends, then that's the time to go out and get that experience, traveling, working overseas, working in different places. Maybe then once you've got the experience, you could come back to a place and work and base there because you've now got the experience to do it. So possibly that's one way to do it. Then you're sort of a bit more situated. Quite often you still have to travel, but more for short term rather than longer term. For myself, my wife is Scottish, so it was living in Australia, come back to Scotland. So it was kind of a shared part, so slightly different. Right, good question though. Hopefully that answered that one bit.
Yeah, I've got another one for you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that you worked as, it's from Harry Papadopoulos.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you worked as a process engineer.
Yeah.
What does process engineering actually cover, and how does it actually differ from mechanical engineering? So it's kind of like a young student point.
Yeah. So technically, if you look at what the definition of mechanical engineering is, it's looking at mechanical equipment, so machines. Structures are quite often in there as well, even though that's a little bit what you might call structural civil engineering. I do most of the projects I do through my business now is actually structural work. One of the guys that I get to do engineering calculations for me, he's a lead structural engineer, but he studied mechanical engineering. So mechanical engineering covers a really wide range of areas. And the first role, when I mentioned process engineering, I was working in an oil and edible oil refinery and packing plant. So I was responsible for operating the margarine production line and making sure that it ran the way it was going to. So I had to understand what the chemical makeup of the margarine and oils were. To make margarine, it has to crystallize, so it has to sit for 3 hours before it gets to the right state. So process engineering, I think, is a little bit more about the processes, usually to do with liquids and those sorts of areas. A bit of chemical engineering mixed in there, a bit of mechanical engineering, but processes, batches, pumps, pipes, flows, those sorts of things. So the reason why I said that mechanical engineering, you need to be prepared for change, is because it's such a versatile role. You can do such a wide range of different things, and So I did reliability engineering, I did process, I did mechanical, I've done structural. Very, very little I would say was purely mechanical engineering in my 25 years of work.
Okay, I've got one more, which I think is quite a good one, actually, Matthew.
Yeah, go for it.
This is actually from Matthew Taylor. He says, after graduating, what are some good resources for developing technical skills, and how do you prioritize which technical skills to develop, e.g. coding, CAD, etc.?
Okay, that's a good question. What I might do then, if it's okay, I might park that one into the end until I go through some of the other areas, and then I can come back and fill in the bits that I haven't already covered.
Absolutely.
Because I think some of that I'll answer, and the bits that I haven't answered, I'll make sure that I answer that for you, Matthew.
Fantastic.
Yep. Right, so that's the first part. I said what I call sort of industry skills. The technical stuff comes into getting some industry experience. The second part, which is linked to the title of this webinar, it's about business. So you're an engineer, possibly, or you're in an engineering interest, and you're applying for jobs, or you're in a job. So what are the businesses looking for other than the prerequisite type of jobs? And this is what I call the business-related skills. The first one is that for me and for people I talk to, they want people to understand what the business does. What's the organization? When you're applying for a job, did you actually research that business before you applied for it or before you got your interview? Because you'll get asked questions on what that business does. And more importantly, what is the vision of that business? What do they stand for? What are their goals? What's the purpose? Obviously, the purpose of most business is to make money. Because if you don't make money, you go out of business. So let's put that as a given. But what else is the purpose or the vision of that business? Why do they do what they do? Is it a charity like the Institution of Mechanical Engineers? The purpose is to provide a variety of skills, a variety of resources, development, all these opportunities for engineers in mechanical. But what about the other businesses that you're working in? If you understand that, then you can much better work within that business to help them achieve their goals. What are the tactics then you need to do to achieve those goals? These are the step-by-step parts. So we need marketing people, we need finance people, we need engineers, we need process people, we need all these roles. What are the tactics we need then to develop and build that strategy? So understanding the organization vision, I think, is a really important one. But most people kind of skip this and they just go, right, what does the job description say? I need to have these education skills. I need to have these technical skills. I need to be able to do this. I need to have this competency. But why? Where does that fit into the bigger picture? And if you're already in a business, this also stands as well. Are you just going to sit there and do your job and become unnoticed and just work away, get paid to do your job 9 to 5 and go home? Or do you want to be part of something bigger? Most people want to be part of a bigger picture. Only so long that you will sit and do your job without understanding why you're doing that job. Where does it fit in to the greater scheme of things? How can I grow up that ladder? How do I go from engineer to project manager to manager? So understand what that business does. And part of understanding what that vision of that business is understanding the customer. Because most businesses have to sell something, whether it's a service or a product. What value does that product, does that service give to the customer? But what about you? What value do you give to that business to then be able to deliver that value to their customer? So it can be an internal customer. It can be internal divisions, internal departments. Maybe you work with different groups. Maybe you have sub-teams. That's what I call the internal customer. The external customer is the person that's outside of your business that will be paying money for your service. What is their need? If you're an entrepreneur, this is the first thing you need to understand. What is the need for what it is you're going to sell to that customer? Because if there's no need for it, they will not buy it. What's the need internally for me to be able to do what I need to do for my job? Do I need to get drawings out by the end of the week? Do I need to do calculations along with the drawings? So I need to work with an engineer as well as a designer. Who are we trying to reach? What is the specific market? What age group are they? What demographic are they? What interests have they got? Where do they hang out? What value do we provide to these people, to these groups? And how do we reach them? Marketing's changed over the last 15 years. Social media is a huge one. What does your social media account look like when somebody's hiring you? Okay, so this is part of the organizational awareness. The customer, internal and external customer. What are their needs? What value do you give personally to those businesses? And what value does your business give to the external customer? Who is it that we're trying to reach? What are we doing to reach them? And what is the best way to do that? Another big part of what I call business skills is project management. And the reason I picked project management as one of the main areas in this is because it covers such a wide range of areas. A lot of engineers will stay as a technical engineer. They'll design, they'll have patents, they'll have products, they'll want to make stuff. They'll want to have drawings, they'll want to make models. And that's brilliant. That's engineering at the heart. But a lot of engineers will also move up the ladder. And when I see an engineering group, you usually start off as a designer kind of role, graduate engineer kind of role. You'll then move up to an engineer, maybe then a senior engineer and a lead engineer and a principal engineer, and that's you being in charge, almost like the technical authority. But after that, do you want to stay as an engineer forever? A lot of people don't, so they're working to management, and project management's that next progression after lead engineer, and usually the people want to go to. Better pay in most instances because you're dealing with people. I said that in one of the earlier parts was you have to understand the organization and what the goals are for the organization. And it's exactly the same with the project. What is the goal of the project? What is the business case? How much money is it going to make you? What is it going to save you? Is it going to improve safety? Same as a business understanding. If you're an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. What is the goal of my business? What's the business case of my business? So this learning project management skills also helps if you want to start a business. Planning is really important. Make sure that you spend more time planning than what you think you're going to need to, because the more you plan, the better your project will be executed and received. Cost, time, and resources are the three critical parts of the triangle of project management. You need to understand how to manage cost, how to manage time, make sure things are delivered when you say they're going to. The hardest one, whether you're an engineer or anyone else, is resources. When I speak to engineers, when I'm training or I'm teaching apprentices or whatever it is I'm doing, this is one thing that I always try to say is that you can learn technical skills, if you're this way inclined, relatively easy compared to learning management and people management skills. To this day, for me in my business, I spend far more time managing the time of people than I do for the technical results of people. If you say to an engineer, I want you to design this, mostly if they're competent in it, they'll design it. But what about all of the other stuff that comes with it? Holidays, sick, not turning up, not doing things when they need to, managing their needs as well, managing their competency, managing their career progression. What about working with teams? What about if you get 3 engineers working together? How well are they going to do that? You have to manage that as a group. So people management is a really big one, and project management is an area that you can build those skills. Communication, massive one. Learn to communicate with people and leading people. Document project and learnings, handover, closeout. How many times have you worked on a project and you try to go to your information and there's information missing? Drawings aren't there. You go off to an oil rig and the oil rig has completely changed to what the drawings show you. You go to work on a production line or a manufacturing plant and there's pipe work where it shouldn't have been, because the closeout part very rarely gets done as well as the other areas, because phew, we've got our project finished, look, it's installed, the client's happy, we're running, let's get out of here, on to the next thing that's pressing. So document control closeout is one that's quite often missed. So project management skills are really important for that whole process of project definition, business goals, entrepreneurs, business startup, same thing. Plan it, cost, time, and resources, manage the cost, time, and resources, communicate the whole way through. You learn really quickly that if you sit in a room or a cubicle all day, you don't get anywhere near as good a result as you do if you go and ask people, involve people. So one part I want to pluck out of that project management is the finance. Okay, so quite often in engineering, we don't get taught finance, but you're going to have to understand how finance works. Cash flow forecasting, balance sheets, budget and accounting. Do you know what these words mean? Do you know what you're looking at when you look at a balance sheet or business finances? Or more importantly, can you even develop them yourself? You don't need to learn these things straight away. You don't need to be experts on them, but have an understanding of what they are, especially if you're part of a team working on a project. If the project manager comes to you and says, I want you to tell me how many hours this is going to take to finish, can you document that? Can you speak with your team of other engineers and collate how many hours to put together a project forecast? Okay, here's a really simple one that I use for my business, a 12-month cash flow projection. And it's only a snippet of it. There's obviously a lot more to this, but you know, what are the sales? Are there any loans? Are there any money coming in, coming out? What are all the outgoings? We've got salaries, pensions, insurance, payroll, memberships, subscriptions. These are all just the people outgoings. What about all of your other stuff like marketing, stock, rent, huge amount of other parts. So can you understand what a cash flow projection looks like, cash flow forecast, managing, balancing budgets? Okay, so you won't know this initially. I think this is a really good one to know when you're in a business. So understand the organization, understand the vision, the needs of the organization. What is your role within that team? Learn project management skills, because that's such a spread of skills that you learn from being part of a project team. And then the one part that I'm sort of plucking out of project management that I think is lacking in a lot of engineers is the business and the finance part of that. All right, so that's part 2, what I call the business skills. Dan, have we got any questions from that section?
No, nothing's come in yet.
No?
You know, not on this site element.
No problem. So if you've got any questions, anyone, please feel free to keep those questions coming in. I'll answer. We've got some time at the end for Q&A as well, so I will leave about 10 or 15 minutes if I can for a longer Q&A session if we get enough questions, but please keep them coming in and we'll answer them as we can. Right, that's good. Let me off the hook easy for that one, Dan. We'll move on to the last section. So the last one is what I call personal skills. So we've covered technical skills, which is what you get when you study technical areas. And Matthew, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about that. I will come back to your question. Industry skills, being prepared to change, being prepared to work in different industries, getting understanding of what all of those different roles, not only as an engineer is, but as a business. Then we're looking at business type of skills. So what is the purpose of the business? What is the vision, strategy, targets? And then out of that, if you understand project management in general, that's a good place to progress. If you want to earn more money, become a project manager. Mostly project managers will earn much better money than an engineer will because you have to manage a lot of challenges. Understand the accounting, the finance, the budgets, and then cash flow as well. So the last part I want to talk about is personal skills. What do you as a person need to do? What do we look for in the people that we're hiring, in the people in a business? And I like to call this personal brand. Have a think about a business. What's a business that you love? What's a company that you love? Maybe it's Starbucks. What do you love about Starbucks? It's probably not the coffee, because I'm no coffee connoisseur, but there is better coffee, most likely, than Starbucks as a pure coffee. But are you buying the coffee when you go to Starbucks, or are you buying the experience and the brand? What do you get? What do you feel when you walk into a Starbucks shop versus when you walk into the Asda Cafe? Very different feeling, and this is what keeps you coming back there. So they spend a lot of time on developing the brand. What is it? What do they stand for? The colors, the feel, the people, the attitudes. When you buy sports equipment, which ones do you buy over others? It's not necessarily because the product is better, but it's because of what that brand stands for and what it makes you feel. And it's the same when we're buying people, when we're hiring people, when we're buying businesses and skills. It's about that personal brand. So think of it in the same way. What image do you give off when someone sees you? CPD, continual professional development. A lot of you would probably be members of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and maybe you're joining this for CPD reasons, because if you want to become a chartered engineer or a corporate engineer, you need to be continuously developing your skills. Develop yourself as a person technically. So this is the one where the question, I guess, is relevant there, where what technical skills? So Dan, jump in if I haven't covered all of this question properly from earlier. The technical skills, let's look at pure engineer. Engineer, you'll spend 3 or 4 years maybe at university, and you'll learn the fundamentals of what I call the fundamentals of engineering. Statics, dynamics, thermofluids, communications maybe. What else? Depending on where you specialize, you might go and learn a bit about electrical systems, robotics, computers, drafting, technology, and things like that. You come out of your course, maybe you're an apprentice. Maybe you're listening to this and you're part of the apprenticeship, so you've learned all the turning and fitting and hand skills. You learn about working with groups of people a little bit, and then you work in your business to learn that. And you work for 3 or 4 years as an apprentice, and you'll come out with those skills. But after that, what do you want to do? Now, I think Matthew said there, one of the questions was drafting. Was it drafting software, Dan?
It was, how do you price the technical skills, e.g. coding and CAD?
Yeah. So the coding one is going to be massive. Most of the work we do these days are with some kind of technology. And if you can find an engineer who can understand programming, that's, for a lot of businesses, that's a huge plus. And again, mechanical engineering doesn't mean you get away with programming. I had to do 2 semesters of programming when I did it a long time ago, and those programs don't really exist anymore. And I'm thankful for that, because I was rubbish at it. I didn't like it. But some of you will get into that and to have an understanding of it, because now, even though I didn't like it, I can understand when people talk about coding. I can see a program, I can understand what it is that's written on it. I could not write it and I could not make it better, but I understand it. So even if you can't do it, understand it. One of the biggest coding software at the moment is Python. So Python is very popular in the IT, in coding ones. So that would be probably my number 1 list of this industry of what the programming coding software is. When it comes to CAD, so computer aided design, we don't very often find people do hand drawing anymore. We're going to use some CAD. AutoCAD is a very popular one. SolidWorks is another one. So Autodesk makes AutoCAD, they make Fusion, they make Inventor. So AutoCAD is usually best, not always, but best for 2D type of drawing, layouts and those sorts of drawing. If you want to get into modeling of 3D, then Inventor is better for that, because what you do is you pick from a library of equipment. You might pick an I-beam and you import that in as a 3D model, and then we import a fish plate or we import some bolts, and we might build our model out of Inventor. So AutoCAD is really, I suggest you learn a 2D CAD drawing, definitely. So AutoCAD, SolidWorks are 2 of the biggest ones. I teach 3D printing, and I was speaking to someone the other day, and they actually do get their primary school students to do 3D printing using Fusion. It's like, what? Like, primary school, I'm sitting here struggling through Fusion trying to get it to work, and we've got primary school kids that understand 3D modeling, and they actually are using 3D printers in their schools. So if you haven't already done so, I definitely would check out some 3D modeling. So Fusion, again, SolidWorks does it as well. If you want to get a bit more fancy, you've got Creo, about £10,000, so probably not for most people. If you want to do a really easy free one, there's one called Tinkercad, which is part of the Autodesk one as well. There's a lot of Shaper, SHAPR is another one which is free. Just understand how to use it. So I think they're some of the extra technical ones. If you can understand these, you put on your CV, it stands out. Okay, yes, we did university, we did courses, but in my spare time, I learned how to do 3D modeling. I learned how to do modeling and then 3D print it. I learned how to do CAD drawings. I learned to program in Python. I'm only 20 years old. I'm not very good at it yet, but I understand it. That makes me more employable to an employer. Okay, so these are all the things you've got to think about. What are the extra activities, extra things you can do? Just do a short course on it. There's free courses out there even for a lot of these things. Get involved. One of the main ways that we get jobs these days is through our networks. The longer you work through your career, the more network you will build. Most jobs are through networking. Most of the jobs I ever get are through people I know or through recommendations. Even as a business, most of the jobs I get as a business are through other work jobs that I've done for people, and they've recommended me to somebody else. Got called up the other day from someone and said, we need some piping calculations done because you did some piping calculations for someone 2 years ago, and they said that you were the best person for that role. It's like, wow, there's 2 years until someone recommends you. It's not immediate. So networking, communication, interpersonal skills, really hard for somebody who's coming up early in their career. Do not burn any bridges. Make sure that you don't have to get on with everyone, but be polite and be friendly to them. I worked in a business in Australia, and one of the places I worked at, my boss was the engineering manager at the time, and he left. A year later, I was a client rep for the product that I sold, and I had to go out to a business and help solve their problems with their machines because it wasn't running very well. It turned out that my main contact point was my old boss, and somebody else from that same business who people didn't get along with went to work for him as well. But because I was always polite and friendly to him, there was absolutely no problem with me working them as a potential client. Yet if I had had conflict and had have not got on with them at the time in the business, a year later, that would have been a problem. So make sure that you don't have to get on with everybody, but be polite, be friendly, be happy. Don't walk around the business with your hands in your pockets and your head down. A lot of people early on in their career are going to be shy and going to be not wanting to show something up like that. Always smile, say hello. I still do it. Anytime I walk through a business, if I don't even know them, just say hello as you're walking past them. Smile, be happy. You don't want to be known as that sulky person walking around with their hands in their pockets that no one talks to. And always look busy. That's another good tip. I always say, make sure you always carry a clipboard and a piece of paper on it and a pen, no matter where you're walking to, because it looks like you're busy. Okay, so this enthusiasm for the job, it's what stands out. Have initiative. Make sure you manage your time. Don't be late for meetings. Don't be late to turning up for work. Suggest things in meetings. They don't expect you to have all the answers. Come up with ideas. Speak up. I've learned more over the years. I'm quite often more the quiet type in meetings, and I'll just say things when I think I've got input. But I've learned over the years that you can't be like that, because it's the people who say their thoughts, say their ideas, get involved in it, that actually get the benefits from it. So learn the communication, learn to network with people, get out to events, go and walk around, Again, as an engineer, it's a very hard skill to learn, is the networking. Going up and talking to people is very difficult for a lot of engineers because they're not that extrovert type of person. So intrapersonal skills, communication, networking, I think is a big part of that as well. The last part of it, maybe you don't have a job. Okay, so a lot of these tips that I'm trying to share here are relevant for people in a job and not in a job. But here's part of those, for those of you who are looking for work. Update your social media profile. Remember, personal brand. When people hire or are looking to hire people, they will look up your social media profile. What's the first picture that they're going to see of you? Okay, it doesn't mean that you cannot have personal pictures. Absolutely, we want to see personal pictures on Facebook and things like that. But be careful what kind of personal pictures that you're showing. What image does it show of you? LinkedIn, do you do posts? Do you comment on other people's posts? Are you active in your industry? Prepare a good CV. CVs have changed a little bit since I used to have to do CVs, so maybe check out what CVs are looking like. But one thing that doesn't change is that we want to see what you did. I don't want to see that you were part of a team that did a project, because how do I know you did anything? Maybe you were just sitting there, one of those quiet people in a meeting. Say, I was part of a project that did this, and my role was to do this, this, and this. And I really felt that I learned from that because I learned these skills, and for the next job, I'm going to do this as well. Okay, so I want to hear what you did personally. Yes, I want to know what the project was. I want to know the benefit, but what did you personally get out of it, or what did you put into it? What job do you want to go for? What do you love to do? This is a perfect opportunity while you don't have a job and while you may be still working remotely to start to target companies, speak to friends. This is where I said networking is one of the main things. Friends, family, workmates, your connections. Ask them, do they know of anybody that's hiring? Do they know of anybody that has work experience going? Do they know of anybody who can give me, I'll do it for free 4 hours a week just to get my foot in the door. Okay, do your applications daily. Treat applying for jobs almost as like it is a job, because I know people who have not been working for 12 months or longer, and they say to me they've applied for hundreds of jobs and then never get any replies back. And you will not get replies back to most of these businesses, but you have to keep persisting, speak to people, keep applying, keep being professional. If you're doing something online, what's in your background of your video? Is it a messy bedroom, or is it just a blank screen even? We can use these virtual type of backgrounds these days. Have something that's maybe not cartoony, maybe something a little bit more professional. We want to see your personality, but we don't want to see everything that your friends would see. Okay, so social selling. Sell yourself like you would as a business. If you were going to sell a product to a business and going to knock on their door and walk in their shop, what would you be dressed like? What would you look like? How would you speak to them? Job searches are the same thing. Working in businesses is the same thing. So that's, I guess, a whirlwind of some of the things I've sort of, when I was talking about putting this webinar together, it was what are the things that I've learned over the years that have stood out, and what is it that I see in people applying for jobs, and when I'm developing engineers, what is it the things that stand out the most? So that's some of the tips that I've picked up over the years that hopefully you've shared, that I've shared, that will be of benefit to you. I do, as Dan mentioned, I do a lot of training through the institution as well, and one I've got coming up in another month or so is both for engineers and entrepreneurs. It's about defining and validating your business ideas. So you could be an engineer in a business. How do you make sure that your idea is going to work? Or you could be an entrepreneur or a potential entrepreneur. Remember, I said that engineers were creative problem solvers. So a lot of the things I've talked about here is strategy, goals, what's the internal customer, what's the external customer, finances, sales, all of that. And that's, I guess, why I've done the course in the way I have, because it matches what I've learned over the years and what I think is important. Right, I think that's everything. Dan, have we got any more questions, I think. There's some contact details just there while you're getting the questions ready. If anyone wants to contact the training department, they can contact me as well. So ask the email there, or anything else I've missed, Dan?
No, that sounds great. And actually, since we sent the point, keep the questions coming. A number have come through now, so which is really good to see.
Awesome. My favorite part. Go for it.
I mean, it's going to be quite mixed depending on where it was within the presentation. So, someone says here, Tom Jagger, is it worth continuing extra part-time study in management and business outside of work, or is it better to find opportunities for experience within a work environment?
That's a really good question, because it's always hard to know, do you keep on developing skills educationally, or do you get it in work related? And I think the question you need to ask is, what is the purpose that you're doing? And it comes down to the value part of it and the need. What's the reason that you want to do that study at that time? So I'm a big believer of getting the fundamentals done first. I said, whether that's, it doesn't necessarily mean you need a degree. When I say fundamentals, it's what's the fundamentals to get into that job first. But where do you want to get to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? If you do that extra study, so you could go off and do a project management qualification, and it might cost you £1,000 or £2,000, and you'll learn some really good skills. But if you've only been in your job for 6 months, and you'd be better off spending your time developing the skills for that role, becoming really good at that role first, and then developing the skills for later. So I think it comes down to each individual's experience based on where they are now and where they want to get to. What is the need for it? What is the need for it now? What's the justification? Should I spend the money? Should I concentrate on what I'm doing? Is it relevant for what I want to get to? Or maybe you just want to do it because you're interested in it, and then absolutely go for it. I talk to people about 3D printing, and yes, businesses will have needs, but maybe you just want to buy a 3D printer because it's fun. Maybe you want to go off and do something fun like that. So I guess it comes down to the need. What it's going to get you, does it fulfill that purpose?
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Matthew. I think that answers it well. Okay, another one here from Moin Ahmed. For an engineer that's willing to progress towards engineering management or project management, yep, what should be the first or early steps and for this kind of development plan?
So is this I guess it's starting off as an engineering team first and then developing up into that project management. So
yeah,
as I said, when you're an engineer, you'll learn to do your engineering role really well. So you'll understand the parts of the technical parts of the project. But the parts that you won't have are the sorts of bits that I mentioned there. It's about communicating as a team and understanding how to manage cost, time, and resource, because they're the three things. Quality comes into that as well, but cost, time, and resources, your kind of triangle. If you want to progress up to project manager, once you understand how the project works, as in the roles of the project, it's going to be then about how well you can manage teams. A project manager's number one role that I found is problem solving. The amount of problems that come up as a project manager is non-stop. And if you can't deal with problems, don't become a project manager. Okay, I speak to people and teams and they go, oh man, another problem. All I do is get problems. It's driving me crazy. I'm sick of it. I hate it. It's like, well, that's the job of a project manager. If you don't like it, don't do it. So managing problems, dealing with people, communicating with people, and leading teams. If you're an engineer, volunteer to be the team leader, volunteer to be a supervisor, volunteer to manage that team of engineers to get the skills to manage a small team first, and then understand how that works, because a project manager is a manager. Understand the technical part, but you don't do the technical part as a project manager. I mentioned about coding. I don't need to know how to code. I don't need to know how to use FEA when it comes to modeling structures. I need to understand what the results are and how they got to that.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, this one interesting one from TJ Gundu. In terms of skill building, what would your steps be when you're trying to pivot industries?
Skill building.
Hmm.
Okay, so pivot industry is a strange term because I don't like the word pivot. I just say we're changing direction or we're changing what we're doing. Pivot is almost like you're doing something and it's almost like put the brakes on, turn and go off and do something random in another direction. So again, it's when people pivot or when people change, it's usually for a reason. It's either because as an entrepreneur, their business model is no longer working. Maybe it never worked in the first place, or maybe the market just doesn't want that anymore. Okay, so if you think of like Blockbuster rented DVDs and videos out. They didn't see that the market was changing and they didn't do mail order DVDs. So when they first used to come out, I used to actually have a subscription service where I could get one DVD mailed to my house. And then as soon as I've watched it, I'd mail it back and another one would come. That was kind of the early version of streaming. They didn't manage, and then it went to online demand. So managing what the industry is doing, what the change is doing, is what that pivot kind of involves. So the skills are understanding what the need is for your skill or your product or your service, trying to project as much as possible how long that need is going to be in place for and what the future need is, and then focus your time, like the question before, should I do project management training? Well, if that's what's going to get you to where you want to go.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Another one here from a student, Christophus Aramins. Yep. What is the best way to communicate your business skills without formal education when you're talking to potential employers?
Yep, so formal education is not necessary for every role. Okay, if you want to be a lead engineer who signs off calculations, you need to have a degree. But for a lot of roles, you don't need a lot of qualifications. I had a lead engineer that worked for us in a business, and he was a lead structural engineer for a engineering offshore oil kind of related business. He was 72, I think, and he had no formal qualifications whatsoever. Because at the time, when he was coming up through engineering, they didn't really exist and they didn't really need them. So again, it's what skills do you have for that employer? Now, let's assume that you do not technically need to have that qualification. Okay, so if you don't have to sign drawings, maybe you don't need it. What skills do you have that they are looking for? What was it, Dan? Marketing, did you say, or manager?
It didn't say, just exactly okay. Potential employees.
So put you on the spot there. You probably scrolled past it. So focus on what the skills that they would like are. If you were that person hiring, what kind of person would you hire? Flip it around that way.
Okay. The conversation around CAD seems to have picked up. There's some questions. Are you okay to answer a couple around this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So Paul Dempsey says, in terms of CAD, is there much of a difference between the different software, e.g. Creo and AutoCAD? And then following that, maybe Martin Coulter says, which 3D CAD package would you recommend with the capability of P&ID intelligence?
Okay, so for the first one, I mentioned a couple of software. Creo is a £10,000, very specialist 3D printing one. Probably not something that most of you would be involved in. There's no particular brand that I would say is better than another. You know, I'm not going to say go out and get Autodesk, SolidWorks, all these other ones, because there's not one that's better than another. There's different ones that do different things. Engineering wise, some are more technical related than some of the sculpting type of ones. What I would say is have a look at the industry you're working in and see what kind of software that one uses. So if you're looking at structural, for instance, you might have Tekla, you might have Inventor, you might have, I said, I'm pretty sure SolidWorks does it. And there's a couple others, and they're good because they've got really good libraries for steel work and things. If you're doing piping, P&ID, you mentioned P&IDs, there might be some other software which is better suited to do P&IDs than it is to do structural calculations. So have a look at what some of the different ones are, what the industries are, because most industries will use different software, just because that's kind of what they've grown with.
Okay, now let's going to go slightly back in some right through from the beginning, Matthew.
Yeah.
What are the importance aspects of professional membership, such as IMechE, obviously, which brings into the career progression, and how does it help?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different institutions and organizations, and if you want to become chartered, so chartered is a goal for a lot of engineers. They need to be registered to be able to charter an engineer. So the UK, the council, they need to be able to do it. And what they do is it's called the UK spec, UKSPEC, and there's 5 different competency criterias, and they'll assess. So the institution of mechanical engineers, for instance, if you wanted to become a chartered mechanical engineer, you have to show competencies in each of those 5 areas, and you have to show that you have experience. Again, it comes down to like the CV I mentioned. Personally, what have you done? Have you done enough in these 5 categories to show you are competent? So a good thing that a lot of the institutions will do. So for instance, if you're a member of the IMechE, you become a member there, you log on to the website, the portal, and they've got a career development scheme. So what you do is CPD, professional development. You go and log all of the things that you've attended, all of the studies that you've done. What did you learn from them? And they help you manage your prior, or as it happens, development. But you can also enroll with businesses. Some of your businesses will be part of what we call the MPDS scheme, where they're mentoring as well. If your business is not part of a mentor scheme, then the IMechE can provide mentors for you. Each area in the UK and worldwide as well, but in the UK in particular, has a committee, and the IMechE have a local committee that develops skills of the local people. So for instance, I'm in Aberdeen, there's an Aberdeen committee and there's a young members committee as well. You can go to events as a member, sometimes as a non-member as well, that they hold. So the young members will be more geared up for the younger engineer. So how do you get jobs? How do you develop skills, networking, those sorts of things? And the more senior committees will be more about presentations, conferences, and things like that. So being part of an organization will help you structure your learning better, structure your development better, but also give you the support and the networking that you might need, that you find hard to get elsewhere.
Okay. I mean, there are plenty more questions coming through, Matthew, but I think obviously I'm conscious of time. People maybe then finish this. Or maybe this one here, maybe take 1 or 2 more.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing. When it comes to CVs, do you recommend portfolios in the engineering field?
I'll talk about me personally, because I'm sure there's people who are experts in developing CVs and marketing, those sorts of things. For me, when we get CVs in, you get a load of them. And how do you get through all of those CVs? You know, sometimes you can get hundreds of applications for the one job. And this is why I said, what makes you stand out? The first thing is that there'll be criteria which I would ask for from a job that you must have. And it's not always about a degree, it's about necessary skills or experience maybe. So the first thing I'll do is I'll scan through and I'll say, do they have those key things? If they do, yes, then I'll go on and look at what else is it that makes them suitable for it. For me, if like you said, if there's a portfolio and there's this big massive page, 10 pages, you just don't have the time to read through that until you narrow it down a bit. So again, my version is I don't particularly want to see a massive long list of portfolio unless I ask for it in the job description. So I might just say, I want you to demonstrate experience. If it's marketing, for instance, yes, I might say, please show me 2 or 3 examples of something in images that you've done. And then, yes, portfolio. But in general, for me, it's about going through them and trying to get down to those smaller few as quick as I can, because there's just so many to get through. So
okay, all right, we'll do just one more question. I'm just intrigued with this one.
Yep, I'll try to be quick in my answers.
Yeah, it's from Miguel Gonzalez. Love the presentation so far.
Thank you.
Always a good start with the question.
Yes, yes.
In my case, I've developed coding and spreadsheet automation skills. My current boss is finding it's a key point for me and the business. I constantly step up outside of my role to automate and improve spreadsheets around the business. However, I find this difficult to sell in a job interview. What would be a good way to word a skill such as this?
Okay, so the first one was that even in that, there was a lot of very technical words. So depending on who it is that's interviewing you or you're talking to, they might not understand those specific terms like the ones you just mentioned there. So the part where I mentioned about value and customer need, think about if you're that customer and you were asking somebody to demonstrate what it is you've done, what would you want to hear from them? What's the benefit of what you personally did? I developed this spreadsheet that did this and it got these results. What's the results? Time savings, money savings, health and safety improvements, better collaboration. What's the benefit of what you did? So I think the people would be more interested in the benefit rather than the technical detail.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thanks very much, Matthew. I think we'll come to the end now. I think that's a really good Q&A session. So just wanted to thank everybody for joining on to the webinar. And thank you very much, Matthew. That was excellent. So just to sort of highlight, obviously, you know, to go further with Matthew and have more training with, you know, through the IMechE and the courses that we offer. Matthew, I don't know, have you got that slide you put up again with the particular course that's kind of key?
Oh, there's that course there, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. So, you know, something there that you can think about, but you know, there are many other IMechE courses.
There's loads of really good IMechE courses of soft skills, technical skills as well.
Yeah, and someone was asking about problem solving in one of the actual questions. Yep. Obviously, you know, we have courses around that as well. So please
head there, Dan.
There is. So please do head to the IMechE's website, which is imeche.org/training. But again, yeah, thank you very much for your attendance to today's webinar. I hope you all found it very useful. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.